Is 7:33. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Nina Uzoigwa, and it's an honor to serve as president of the Thoracic Surgery Medical Students Association. On behalf of our entire executive board, I want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's discussion and conversation focused on careers in cardiothoracic surgery, academic medicine, and health equity. We're so honored to have Dr. Donnell Bowen here with us, not just as a cardiac surgeon, but also as a mentor, a leader, an advocate who has shaped the culture of our profession in so many different ways. So we'll spend this evening exploring the journey behind his work, the decisions, the challenges, the lessons, and the vision that continue to drive his impact. So this session is meant to be very honest, very practical, very interactive. We'll start with some moderated questions from people who submitted their questions at the very beginning during the registration process, and then we'll end with some Q&A from the audience. And as we're going, don't hesitate to go off mute, to drop questions in the chat. We really just want to have a very organic conversation, very laid back for our pre-medical students and medical students on the call. So Dr. Bowen, thank you so much for being here and investing in the next generation from this point of view. And with that, let us begin. So our first question here, talking about your journey and defining moments. You've shared that reading Dr. Ben Carson's autobiography really inspired you earlier on. Tell us more about that story and how that has formed and sort of really catered your vision and your story.
Well, first, let me just say thank you for having me. You know this, probably others don't. I don't do very many interviews, and I kind of stay, off in the corner as much as possible. I try to be low profile, but I think this is important, and I'm honored that you thought that I was a worthwhile person to interview and speak with. And so it was important that I commit to this. And I think if I didn't, TT might have, I'd hear something from her about it as well. But when I was much younger, I think much different than most kids nowadays. I always wanted to be outside playing sports. I was very active, athletic, and with that, I didn't read very well. So my father, he didn't like that I'd spend the whole summer just wanting to be outside, and so I used to have to read books and have to have a reading log because I was really good with math and science, but not so much reading. So the true story is that in seventh grade, he got me this book of the autobiography of Ben Carson. Nobody in my family is in medicine. My father can't even stand. He'll ask me occasionally how his work, and if I get into any detail, I have to stop because he gets squeamish just thinking about blood. So nobody in my family's ever been in medicine, and it was my first exposure. You can't really think of wanting to be something until you've been exposed to it in some form. And so his story kind of resonated with me, not in the sense that he dealt with more life challenges at his early age than I had, but he wasn't the best student, and I was a good student, but he wasn't the best student. He was called dummy, and clearly this is somebody that had the aptitude to do amazing things. And so when you read his story, it's quite remarkable where his journey, being the kid that was made fun of, to then being tops of his class, and then going on to be a neurosurgeon, and the rest is history that you're aware of, being the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Hopkins, and being the first person to separate conjoined twins at the head. So it's a remarkable story. And with that, it made me think that I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, not really knowing what that was and not having any exposure to that. The only other physician I knew, one of my closest friends that I played basketball with, his father was an infectious disease doctor that worked at the HIV clinic in Broward County, where I grew up in South Florida. So but I didn't really know what he did. I just knew that he was a doctor, and that was it. And so fast forward going to getting into school, I realized I didn't really enjoy neuroanatomy. And so I knew that neurosurgery was not going to be for me because it wasn't something that interested me. And later down the line, I got exposed to cardiac surgery, and it was just that aha moment that sounds cliche, but the reality is that it truly was just that simple. When I finally saw my first heart surgery, I knew that was what I wanted to do. So I don't have some elaborate story. I didn't have some, personal statement that mapped out everything and why I wanted to be a cardiac surgeon. It just hit me, and I knew, and that was it. So.
It's so beautiful to see how the consistency of your father just being able to help you have those reading logs, being able to read the book, being able to sort of expose yourself is so fundamental in being able to sort of figure out what kind of specialty you want to do and having people who are able to keep you accountable. From that experience, what really profoundly shaped the way that you practice medicine and surgery today?
Well, that's an interesting question, and it would be hard to probably pinpoint one thing. I a few things, not to make this about my father. One practical thing that I utilize to this day that I learned during residency. But one thing that you all as medical students, pre-medical students, nobody teaches you really how to be a good doctor. And and at least I wasn't taught, and I don't think it was commonplace. Then nobody teaches you really how to have good bedside manner and really how to care for people. And so I think some of that is what you're given, whether that's your learned experiences in life, given from your parents. And my father, and some of the reason that I am the way that I am is largely because of my parents. And I shy away from the spotlight. And I remember when I was in starting residency, my father used to write me handwritten notes, and he
Wow.
always would say things about one of the notes said, my humanistic qualities will be what separates me from other people and how I'll care for people. But one of the things that he was trying to communicate to me was a story. I don't know if you all know who Tom Coughlin is. He's a former NFL football coach for the New York Giants. And there was an article written about him and how they weren't performing all that well. And he was the New York media was criticizing him and really hard on him, and how he didn't feel sorry for himself. He didn't, go in a corner and complain. He just worked his butt off and got better and obviously led them to win a Super Bowl against the Patriots. And my father's point to me is that life humbles everyone, no matter who you are. Life humbles you. So it's better to humble yourself than to have somebody else do it for you, right? And I think I take that with the patients as much as I can, because I recognize that as a cardiac surgeon, many of my patients see me and they meet me for an hour. And the next day or the day later, they're having to trust me to do a major heart operation on them. And so if I can show them some humility, some empathy, they'll trust me, and they'll make them feel comfortable in a moment in which they're probably at their their most scared moment, unsure time in their life. And they have no earthly idea, most of them, really what they're getting themselves into. So that may sound like something that's just made up, but it's genuine. Probably the most common compliment I get is that I have extremely good bedside manner, because I really try to help patients and their families get comfortable. And sometimes you have to read the room and know whether you should start joking about something else when you're talking about the risk, and you can see everybody getting tense and they're getting nervous or they're crying or whatever, and you gotta divert that. And that's not something that's taught to you, but it's something you should be aware of. So that definitely has always helped me. From a practical standpoint, I'm blessed in some ways and maybe cursed. I trained in the military in general surgery. Very structured environment, probably more so than civilian environments, which is not necessarily a good thing in a lot of ways. But one of the things was that I always learned, and an attending that said, go see the patient. It didn't matter what the nurse called you for, how trivial it might be. If you allowed yourself to just sit on the phone and make up in your mind what was really going on, you might miss an opportunity to learn, or miss an opportunity to take care of that patient. And the reality was that sometimes, though well-intentioned, the nurse may not be able to communicate with you exactly what's going on with the patient. And the only way that you'll actually figure that out is if you walk up those stairs or walk down them, walk down the hall, regardless of whether it inconveniences you or not, and you see that patient. And so I'm known, even at this stage of my career, where I've been practicing heart surgery for, I guess, 11 years now, I'm known to see my patients multiple times a day. And when the nurses have questions or concerns, you'd be surprised. I don't fancy myself to be the smartest person in the room, but I in general outperform most people around me, because I actually pay attention more and I actually see the patients and know what's going on. And so I don't see somebody for just 5 minutes in the day and make the decisions for them for the whole day. I've seen them multiple times throughout the day and follow the trends, and that has never failed me. And there will be times in your career where it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you might have been able to get 15 minutes of sleep or something, or you were able to talk to your child for a minute on the phone in the evening, or whatever it may be. As uh, but the reality is that there's going to be some times where you just got to stop what you're doing or inconvenience yourself or whatever you had planned, and you go see that patient. And I promise you, there's going to be many a times it's going to be something silly, and you might not have needed to do it, but there's going to be a time where you're actually going to make a decision that is not only going to reward the patient, but maybe everybody's going to look around and learn something from you and be like, "Wow, how did you catch this? This is phenomenal," or "This is a major save for you." And it ultimately boils down to, and I never forget my attending always saying, go see the patient. And he used to make this statement, which is crazy. He says, "We all have a loaded gun when we graduate." And I'm just trying to make sure you have I forget how he used to phrase it, but basically like you have as few bullets as possible in that gun, and so that sounds funny, but the point is well taken. And I've never forgotten that over 20 years.
That is so beautiful. And one thing that I've also noticed and admired just being around, and especially in the spaces where you hold leadership positions, is that you lead with a sense of, or a core sense of humility and humanity, just putting that at the forefront, at the center of all your conversations, all your interactions, not only with your patients, but with people, your coworkers, people that you're working with, people that you're leading, the teams that you're sort of steering ahead. And it's really beautiful to sort of see how that's blooming and ricocheting and creating spaces where people feel safe, comfortable, and feel as if they can be their true, authentic selves. I guess from that standpoint, and also your service, how has your experience in being high structured, high responsibility environments shaped your leadership style and the way that you vision leadership and being a leader in this field?
Well, um, I think when you're in the military, you see some good and bad. You walk in and you assume that everybody's a really good leader because, well, I mean, they have this rank and they should be, right? And they're a field grade officer, they're a lieutenant colonel. What I actually realized was like, man, some of you are really terrible leaders, actually, and you're not. Um, you may be the most senior, you may be the busiest, you may be the most academically productive, and in some ways, that's I think that plagues our specialty or medicine in general, is that sometimes that becomes synonymous with who should run the department. But reality is that they don't necessarily have the best leadership attributes. And so I I, I saw some really good leaders, and I think I learned from people that were bad leaders and how I wouldn't want to handle things. But I think one of the most important things is one, I think in order to be a good leader, and Dr. Tom McGilvery talked about this in his STS presidency address years ago, you have to be a really good follower, right? But not in the sense of like, I want to follow because I'm just doing this so that I can fit in and make you feel good as I'm following behind you so that then you'll promote me to the next position, right? That's all a game that a lot of people play that I personally have never subscribed to, but I understand it, and sometimes that may be necessary to move up the academic ladder. But I've always found it troubling when people who are in a position of leadership or power take the easy way out when there's conflict or there's something challenging. And so I saw a lot of that, and I think some of that is again probably what was instilled in me. But a friend of mine when I was a resident dealt with some really unfortunate things in his orthopedic residency. And um, the reality is that he may have had some struggles himself individually, but I don't think he was given a fair shake. The tough thing for me was, as a second year resident, or maybe I was a third year by that point, is that he had no one really that was an ally that was willing to speak up and give a perspective that was different than everybody else in the room. And I could share that perspective. We looked similar. We had a shared perspective in that regard. And I had to be the one to stand up and speak on his behalf. It ultimately didn't end in his favor, but I know that I enlightened a lot of people when that's a long, drawn out process when you go through remediation and then get removed from a program. And all he wanted to do ever be was an orthopedic surgeon. And I remember looking, and I think in some ways I had some pride within myself knowing I looked out of the room when they had this trial and all the stuff I had to speak at and stuff. And I said, you know, this is wrong. You know, this is wrong. And I knew they knew it was wrong, but they didn't have the guts or the gumption to say anything. And I never wanted to be that. And so everywhere I've gone, I'm not the loudest person in the room unless I'm forced to be the loudest person in the room. And I'm normally only forced to be if nobody else is going to speak up if there's something wrong. I always felt like I have to be the one. And I definitely need to speak up for people, those who are disadvantaged or those who are run over. I mean, I've seen we have many women on this call. I don't think it's remotely the same playing field. And I don't care if anybody on this call agrees with me or not. I know it because I've seen it. And so sometimes it requires a man to say, hey, listen, like, first of all, if you're going to talk to her, why don't you address her by the name doctor, just like you called everybody else doctor today? And so, and sometimes you don't necessarily have to do it in a confrontational way, but you do have to draw some attention to that. We have many people who are of color. I know residents when I was a faculty that have been called, you know, we're military, but we're still a level one trauma center. So we got a bunch of civilian traumas. If people are drunk, people do whatever and call people names and inappropriate names. And I don't go to the patient to tell the patient that, hey, this is not appropriate to you call somebody the N-word. My role was to go to the leadership as they've tried to rationalize and think about how they're going to address things. And I wanted to remind them, while you're spending all this time and all this energy, I want you to understand that you have a young surgeon that's a female that's trying to reconcile with all that was said to her. So at least, at the very least, can one of you put yourself aside for a second and your ego or what you think needs to happen and think about her for a second and maybe give her a phone call and extend, you know, show some care, some compassion for her. And I think that has always resonated with other people because the only thing you'll probably hear me say that sounds like I'm bragging is I'm authentic and I'm gonna be that because I've found that I can get anybody to get behind you if they really believe that you are who you think you are. And that's the reality. And so for all you young folks, if you can just be yourself and just be authentic with it, the sky's the limit. It is. I mean, there's a different algorithm, of course, to move up the ladder and do all these things academically. But at the end of the day, I'm just telling you, you're never going to be wrong for just being yourself. It doesn't mean you have, if you're not a loud person, you're not out in front, you don't have to be, but you can still be a leader and you can still lead and you can still step up when in times of need and people will respect that. So I think to answer your question, that's been a combination of seeing good leadership and very poor leadership, if I'm being frank. And don't assume because everybody wears a military uniform that they're a good leader, because I'll be the first one to tell you that they're not.
Thank you for giving such a candid answer. It's so very such a privilege to hear your experience and how you kind of use the pain, the frustrations, the experiences of others to kind of formulate the way that you envision leadership and your path forward. And as we're transitioning more into surgery, what do you think distinguishes a exceptionally good surgeon from one that's strong, basically?
Preparation. You, I strongly believe that outcomes are not just predicated upon what you do in the operating room. It's about what you have thought of and what you've prepared yourself and the patient for prior to getting to the operating room. And so I've always emphasized and focused on the details and anticipate. And some of this comes with, I truly think that our training really teaches us how to navigate complications and how to deal with them, right? That's the real value. I mean, sure, you're going to learn how to do a cabbage, or maybe if you do the general surgery route, how to do an appendectomy. And you need those skills. You need those repetitions. Sure, I'm not going to ever suggest that only dealing with complications teach, but that's the reality is that eventually the really, really good surgeons are the ones that either are smart enough to do things before they get to the operating room to keep them out of trouble, or once they get into trouble or something unexpected in the operating room and they know how to figure out how to get out of it. Those are always the people that I found to be the best surgeons, not just somebody who technically is really sound. And the other thing is I think what makes an exceptional surgeon, or the difference between an exceptional surgeon and a good one, is your commitment to the patient after the fact. I don't take that lightly. Obviously, now things are more defined where, hey, we do the surgery. We know that our outcomes are now better when patients are managed by a critical care team. No question. Not saying that the surgeon, we know outcomes are not as good when the surgeons are just trying to manage everything in the ICU, without question. So, not suggesting anything, but it's still your patient, and it still has to be some ownership. And people don't know what they don't know. They've never trained to be a heart or lung surgeon or esophageal surgeon or congenital surgeon. They know how to take care of some of those patients afterwards, but there's inherently, you know, as much or more because you're the one that operated on the person beforehand. You saw them preoperatively, and there's still value in that. And so I don't let anybody ever think that I'm not still highly involved in my patient's care afterwards. You might get to manage the event and do all these things, but you're still going to have to make sure you're talking to me and I'm going to be talking to you about that patient because it's my patient. And I think the combination of their expertise and my involvement still leads to the best outcome. So you also have to have some follow through. Um, don't don't just think you just operate and then you just give the patient away and somebody else manages it from that point on.
And also adding on to that, for those who are pre-medical students, medical students in the call, and as they're preparing for residency and whatnot, what do you think are key skills or elements or character traits they should hold, especially as they enter moments of complications or uncertainty where there's a crisis with a patient in the OR? How should they lead in those environments, and what should they look out for, and how should they work together with the entire OR team, not just the other surgeons who are also assisting?
Do your very best to maintain your composure. And I'm going to say this knowing that I've played this on both sides, right? Like if you let your nerves get the best of you, you don't always perform as well, or you may regret how something went. And so that's a gradual thing. It takes time, it takes practice, actually. So, how I can manage emergencies or crisis situations in the operating room now is different than how I did 10 years ago. And so, it's an evolution. So, don't be hard on yourself. It takes some time. So, I haven't, I've been in my new job for 7 months now. And, I dealt with some things. And my first call, I had a type A dissection, first call in the hospital. I've never done, I mean, I don't even know, I've never done anything middle of the night, type A dissection on a lady that has Marfan's that's 35 weeks pregnant. How nervous can you possibly be now? Because you're thinking, first of all, I've never done this, I dealt with this particular issue because this lady is pregnant. We're going to deliver her baby and then I'm going to operate. And I have all the pressure of keeping this person alive so they hopefully they can meet their child and their child can meet them. So nobody knows this, but I went and took some deep breaths. I walked around outside for a little bit, and you just have to stay as calm as possible. You have the training, you have the skill set. Just don't let your wits, leave you. And so took care of it, and everything went well. And then what comes of that is obviously everybody's like, oh my gosh, this new guy did a valve sparing root on somebody in the middle of the night. This is like, next thing you know, they're trying to do this interview on me in a video. And of course, you know where that goes. I mean, I keep just responding, no, I'm okay. I don't need to do a video. No, we don't need to, and until finally the CEO's like, no, we're going to do a video on this. We want to send this out. So it gives you the opportunity to, I mean, it was a blessing because it gets my name out there. And I feel like I just did my job. But the reality is I was really nervous. But you have to be able to control those nerves. I've had other situations when I was in residency, one of my attendings, something would hit the fan and it would seem like he was just in la la land. Not in the sense of not engaged, he's very much engaged. And everybody's panicking, and he's literally just like moving, and he's moving efficiently, but he doesn't seem rattled at all. And so I tried to mirror that, mimic that over time. And I think I have mastered that. when I was at my last job in Houston, there would be times the nurses would be like, I don't understand. Like you seem like you're like it's a complete panic and you're, some cath lab disaster that you have to take straight to the operating room, and you're like trying to open the chest and get them on bypass immediately. And they're like, how do you remain so calm? And I'm like, well, because if I get myself all worked up, my hands don't move as well, right? And so really just I've learned to deep breathe. That seems cliche, but if you're not really if you're really into stuff like that, meditation and deep breathing, it really offers you something, and it gives you something in those short minutes because you don't need that much time of deep breathing, right? Like all you need to do is you're washing your hands and you you do a couple sets of some box breathing or 4-7-8 breathing or something, and it slows everything down for you and you go in there and you take care of it. And I always say this, and this is not meant to be insensitive, but I would always tell the techs and everybody, and I literally sometimes put my hand on them and say, listen, you know who's not dying right now? We're not dying. So we just have to stay as calm as we can to take care of this patient. If we can do that, we might be able to save this patient's life. And people respond to that. And nobody, not in heart surgery. You want to yell at me playing basketball or yell at me playing a sport, that will actually get something out of me and I will respond. But very few people, if you yell at them in a situation like that, where they got to hand you fine instruments or do whatever, it's going to make their heart rate go faster. Their hands are going to shake. They're not going to think as well. Nobody performs better in that environment. So it doesn't really benefit you in any way to start carrying on and yelling and whatever. And most of the time when people are doing that, it's because they're just projecting their insecurity onto everybody else. So try to control all that because it doesn't, I can tell you the times where I've let my nerve desert me or get a little wound up, even if a little bit. I'd rather be just like my attending, like I told you, like the roof is falling, and I'm like, oh, something's going on. I don't know. Just keep going. That's the only way you're going to best take care of that patient.
Absolutely. And I think that's a skill that we don't really get taught in med school or in high school. We kind of learn it on our own through our own life experiences and traumas, and just being able to be calm, be prepared, be able to practice deep breathing. And it's so great to set students on this call are getting exposure to that and what that looks like in a leadership level as an attending, entering a new job for 7 to 8 months, and just being able to see how you're able to sort of really ground yourself in the things and the practices that you kind of honed in on in previous years and really allowed you to sort of do this great thing where everyone, even the CEO, is trying to give you the spotlight. And it's really great to sort of hear that too. It seems like we're getting a series of different questions in the chat, one from Grant. So as a surgeon, how have you learned to balance growing confidence in your skills while staying humble and cautious?
Yeah, you definitely you definitely got to have a little gumption. You got to have a little something inside of you because you're going to have to tackle some tough things. I mean, there's just no way around it. There's going to be high risk cases that you're going to have to navigate, and you got to have some confidence in yourself. But it doesn't mean confidence doesn't need to be synonymous with being cocky. And there's nothing wrong with looking a patient in the eye and saying, I can do your operation, I can do it well. And I don't think there's anything cocky about that. There's nothing wrong with tracking your outcomes and being able to quote that to your patient. That's not bragging. Hopefully, you're doing that so that you can reassure them. Every patient I take for heart surgery, I talk to them about the risk of dying and what that percentage may be if it's something that I can predict. And it's not to scare them, it's to give them a realistic impression. And most of the time, it's to reassure them that the risk is much lower than they think it is. But but you also can't take it lightly. It is a true privilege. And I think the day that you don't take it as a privilege and you're not a little bit nervous every time you walk in that room, knowing that you have a patient's hands, a patient in your hands, it may be time to reconsider things. I don't, you know, in some ways, I wish I was a little bit more cocky and a little bit more felt um, more confident in myself because I see other surgeons who I don't necessarily think are more skilled than me, but they'll take some. I mean, I feel like and this is my assumption. I'm like, man, they didn't lose any sleep last night. They're going to go to the operating room and just know that they can do something well, and then it may be a struggle. Whereas I'm like, thinking about it, waking up multiple times in the middle of the night, like playing it over in my head, like some big case that I may do. And that's just the reality. Um, but you have to, in order to be in this specialty, yeah, I mean, I don't want you to be cocky, but there's nothing wrong with being cocky, especially if you're good. That's fine. If that's who you are, that's fine. I respect a lot of cocky surgeons. I do. I have no problem. It doesn't bother me. It's not my style, but I definitely got it in me. I definitely got, you know, the fortitude to take on challenging things, and I don't shy away from that. I think you have to be able to do that. I don't know. Does that answer the question? I don't know if I answered that, but
Does. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Our next question in the chat is, what systems did you have in place during medical school residency to prepare and stay ahead of the game?
well, I think that depends. So, I mean, let me put one thing in context for many of you, just so that you have a better appreciation. You are now entering the specialty when it's highly, 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 highly competitive. Way more competitive than when I entered it. So I just want to be fair to you all in saying that. So I'll tailor my answer a little bit towards that, just because when I applied CT surgery, people were like, "No, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to work all these hours and then um, deal with the lifestyle was terrible." And so 50% of the slots were filling when I applied for heart surgery, for thoracic surgery fellowship. That's clearly not the case now, right? I mean, I don't even know, like what are the numbers? 70% of the applicants actually match or something. So way more competitive than when I did. So I think I didn't have to think about that necessarily as much as you all do as far as being in medical school, applying for I-6. Obviously, I-6 wasn't around, but it was not even an option for me, again, being in the military. But you have to be thinking about your scores. So I think there's one aspect of how do you prepare your application. So that means not necessarily your personal statement, but your CV. Research is now obviously, required. I, 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 I don't use that term lightly. I mean, I think it kind of essentially is required to some extent, or publications or presentations, some objective evidence that you have commitment to the specialty, right? Whereas I could do some research or something, it could be just in general surgery or something, it could be some random thing, and they're like, "Oh, we're just happy that you've you've done something and you've published something." Now if you want to do I-6, they want to know that you're truly committed to cardiac or thoracic or whatever. So so I think you have to have a plan with that and getting a mentor or people that can help you along to make you competitive. Even if you're a general surgery resident, I think you have to be doing that to be able to get a thoracic surgery fellowship position, the traditional pathway. So that's one thing that I think you need to have a plan and be working on that early on. From a clinical practical standpoint, how did I stay ahead? Well, I mean, I would go to clinic, tumor board, or the operating room, and having read about all the patients I thought I was going to see in clinic beforehand, obviously, I think it's a no-brainer. You need to go to the operating room and be prepared for that. And then I would go to tumor board, and as I was more of a senior resident, and I would read about everybody else's patients too. So my other chiefs would be presenting tumor board, but I already read about their patients too, to, so that if questions got asked, I could answer that question too. So I've already done that. So I mean, some of that is just your commitment to learning. I think that never hurts you in any way and pays dividends. It's not that I don't want you to think I was trying to be a front runner. I think I was just so scared and afraid that people might think that I wasn't good enough or I wasn't smart enough that I overcompensated and I benefited from it, right? I mean, I don't know if they do morning report like they used to now, but I would go to morning report. And if it was something unusual that I saw on call the day before, I'd stay up and read and read and read. And I had an attending that would challenge us, and he'd just hammer us with questions. And I didn't like it when couldn't get a question right. He was cocky, he's arrogant. I didn't particularly like him all that much. And so I would get into a point sometimes where I would say, I know he's gonna come for me tomorrow. I'm coming ready for him. And I remember my program director one time, I stayed up reading about pancreatic cysts for till like 2 or 3 in the morning. Morning reports at 7. And I had to leave my house at 4:45 because I lived in Hawaii and the traffic is terrible. So I had to get to the hospital by 5:15 or something in the morning. So I'm only slept like 2 hours. And he just peppered me with 20 questions. I mean, 21 questions I recall. I answered 20 out of 21 questions right. And my program director was like, hmm. He smiles. He goes, looks like somebody's been burning the midnight oil. I, but that's probably not a good, I just, maybe that's my competitive nature, but there's got to be something inside of you that drives you a little bit you can be really good on paper, right? Like I wanted to be really good clinically, and I wanted people to respect me and think that I was a worthwhile surgeon clinically. And so that takes practice too. And so I would encourage you, one aspect is beefing up your application, your CV, and all those things, and what you look like on paper. Don't ever neglect who you are as a surgeon, um, as well, right? And a lifelong learner. And I think that you have to embrace that.
Thank you so, so very much. A lot of people are so moved by what you're saying and the wisdom that you're sharing right now. I'll read a heartfelt message from one of our students. Dr. Bowen, the part about being compassionate towards female surgeons, especially as an incoming new young surgeon, was really beautiful and inspiring. It's refreshing to hear this and motivates me. Is there any advice you would give to young women on how to handle such situations where we stand up for ourselves but maintain respect towards seniority, both in residency and thereafter? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think this requires practice too. And this is not easy. This is for, I mean, the reality is that I'm going to answer this question for women, but this goes back to my original comment about not being somebody that just sits on the sideline and you watch things happen and you don't really say anything. You've got to learn how to deal with difficult conversations and uncomfortable things early on. And don't be fooled into thinking that means you have to be loud or you have to be demonstrative or get into big arguments with people. That's not what I'm telling you. That's not what I'm telling you. I don't want you to think that, because in many times that's not in your favor because you're one of the lowest people on the totem pole. And to be quite honest with you, you're joining a specialty of egomaniacs. So they most of the time can't handle it if somebody juniors in them actually says something that, even whether it makes sense or not, they're like, So I'm not suggesting you take that on. But what I am suggesting is that you learn how to respectfully, succinctly nip some things in the bud. You learn how to, in some ways, there's some power in some things that you just say, I'm not going to entertain this. I'm not going to give it any energy. And then there's some things you can't ignore. And I demand that you not ignore, because it may be something that's blatantly disrespectful to you or somebody else, and you have to address it. But it doesn't mean you have to address it the way that I may address it. It doesn't mean that you have to address it the way somebody else may address it. You address it the way that and you just say, hey, I, this is how I feel about this. I'm not sure if this is what your intention was, but I would ask that we maybe not just consider this perspective as a woman surgeon. This is how this makes me feel, and I just would ask that you maybe consider that. And I don't want to make a big deal of it. That's not my goal, but I just wanted to give you that perspective and move on. They keep doing it, then your intuition was right. So now you then have to take it a step further, right? You're either going to address that with that person, or you're going to address it with somebody more senior that can adjudicate that situation. But many times, whatever you have in the back of your mind that you think was probably something, probably is something. The question is now it's not your gut's normally right, right? Like, I mean, we have intuition for a reason. The question is more so, how much energy are you going to dedicate to that particular issue? And I would answer this also by saying, for anybody here on the call, whether you're black, white, you're male, female, when you see somebody else that's dealing with something or a challenge, I'm not asking you to stick your neck out and just fall on the train tracks for them. But every now and then you can give somebody a nudge and just say, hey, lighten up a little bit, or maybe they're trying, or hey, maybe that's not the most appropriate thing we should have said there. Let's move on. What I mean? Or maybe it's something as simple as you're a first year trying to communicate something to the senior or trying to present something, and you have a concern and nobody wants to listen to you. And maybe it requires Grant to say, hey, can we just let Megan speak for a quick second? Just let her hear her out. And that pays dividends, right? And it shows that you're not necessarily complicit in all of the behavior, because one of the hardest things when you're minoritized or whatever the case may be is you feel isolated. It's even worse when you're out there on your own. And that's why I told you that story about my friend Joe Jones, because I could imagine what he felt like being out on his own. And I wouldn't want that for any one of you. It don't matter what you look like. It don't matter what your background is. None of that, right? Like none of us are successful because we do it all on our own, right? And it's not good to feel like you're on your own. So but I do think you have to learn to go back to my answer. You have to practice how to do it, and you have to get comfortable with it because you get nervous. You're like, I don't know if I want to speak up, but your attendings are somebody's going to disrespect you. It's without question. They may not be doing it intentionally, but they're going to do it. So you have to find ways to say something like, hey, sir, actually, I hear what you said. Can we talk about what you told me today in the operating room in front of everybody? I understand what you said. I just want to give you this feedback that I learned a little bit differently, or I think I process things in this way. And so I know you were saying it like this. This is how kind of I took it. And I want to learn from you. And I also just want to communicate that this is maybe how I best learn, or how I process these things. And I hope that doesn't come off in any way to be disrespectful. That's not my intent. And so I don't know. I'm talking on the fly, but the reality is that that becomes easier and easier and easier. All these things we're talking about as you practice them, because nobody's going to teach you this in medical school. Nobody's going to teach you this in residency, and and most of them can't teach you because they're not good at it themselves. I'm gonna be honest with you, they're not. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that candid response and being able to meet students where they are with their questions. We have another question from a high school student, Maria, who's also pre-med and a future CT surgeon. How do you personally define success as a physician, and what keeps you inspired after many years in such a demanding specialty?
well, I don't know that I could answer what defines success. I think that's going to be different for everybody. We have the full complement of surgeons, and you all will be that. By that I mean those that are in academics, those that are heavily in research, those that are heavy in leadership, those that just want to be clinically active, those that are technically proficient in some unique skill, robotic surgery, those that are going to be community surgeons. And so that's all different for everybody. I think you can't define that success until you figure out kind of what your path is and what you want it to be. So that's what I would encourage you to during your training, and you have to figure out kind of what you think you want your life to be as a cardiothoracic surgeon. Um, so that's that. What was the second part of the question?
What keeps you inspired after many years of service within surgery, or CT surgery?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do. Y'all heard the story about me and neurosurgery, and so once I realized I didn't want to do neurosurgery, I had to figure out, do I want to do something surgical or medicine? So I did my internal medicine rotation. I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'm definitely not doing this. So I need to do something where I fix things. I think what inspires me or keeps me going, it's such a rewarding specialty. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be some days where you're going to be up all night, or you're dealing with bleeding or something, and you're going to be like, why did I choose this? But those are the minority of days. And what you're blessed with is, I mean, you're going to get paid a substantial amount of money to do a job that I think I would do for far, far less, because you get so much t- fed to your soul just by seeing people do well, right? Like, and I think most people still go into medicine because they want to help people. And I think CT surgery affords you that ability more than other specialties. I think other specialties you kind of just get lulled into like, well, I mean, I'm just doing my thing. I'm going to go around on these patients. I'm a hospitalist, and I don't mean to. I hope if anybody ends up doing that or whatever. But CT surgery, yes, there's things about it that are routine, but even your routine things are very life-changing operations for people. It's hard to not feel something and feel a connection to that. So that's what keeps me going. And I think the other thing that inspires me is the field just continues to evolve, and you constantly feel like you're like playing catch up. Like every time you go to the SDS meeting, you come back and you're like, man, am I a good surgeon? Like, I mean, I just listen to all these people talk about all these extravagant things that they do. Like, I guess I need to like get better and do this. And so, I mean, it's a healthy thing, right? Like, I mean, it's just the specialty continues to grow, not just from an innovation standpoint, but also just look at this. I mean, I can tell you if first of all, I don't even know if this organization existed uh, when I was applying for CT surgery. But if it did, I'm pretty sure the composition of people that would be on the call wouldn't look like this. So that also encourages me. We have so many more women doing heart surgery now, not just thoracic. So I mean, I think that's a blessing. People are now feel comfortable having children during their training, and I mean, I think that's what what we should all want. Um, you know what I mean? Like, if you ever had a child, it's like one of the greatest things in the world, and you can't imagine life without it now. And so yeah. Is it harder to probably have a child and do training? Yeah, but I'm pretty sure all the people that have children would say, I wouldn't trade that in for anything in the world, right? And so I'm glad we're past the days where people have fear of that, or people can't see themselves in the specialty because they don't see anybody that looks like them. So that I think encourages me too.
Absolutely. Our next question here. Oh, there's a lot of questions here. I'm trying to choose the best two, given that we have about 10 minutes left. Um, let's talk about Nicholas's question. So, at this stage in your career and as an attending, what is your motivation for doing research, and what is an effective collaboration between a medical student and an attending as yourself look like from your viewpoint?
All right. Well, Nicholas, for one, I'm not very active in research. Not really necessarily my motivation, but with that said, because I think I can get to the root of what you're trying to ask me. That doesn't mean that I'm not academically inclined and not up to date trying to practice evidence-based medicine. I still participate in the STS meetings where I serve as a moderator. Sometimes I'm a manuscript reviewer. I'm participating, doing some stuff with the workforce on evidence-based surgery. So you just have to figure out what it is that works for you. I realized being in a complete community setting was probably not for me because I'm like, man, these jokers, nobody reads, like, and I can't be around, I need to be around people that are really up to date on things. So research isn't necessarily my motivation, but I think you should know that you don't have to be somebody that's just at an academic institution with a training program to do research if that's something that you're truly, truly passionate about. Obviously, it's probably a little bit more conducive doing that. And then your question was, is what does that look like for medical students? And so I think that depends on, so depending on where you're in school, you may already have an elaborate network of people doing research and access to people right there. And if you do, perfect. You need to just lock in right there and latch on to somebody and then get things done. Don't do not make yourself a part of a bunch of projects all at one time and actually have nothing completed. That's not like nobody cares when you put on your CV that you're doing this, and there's actually no publication or presentation or anything behind any of that. It doesn't really, it has no value for you. It has zero value. So just want you guys to understand that when they're looking at this, I'm not in a place in a residency, but I have insight to this because for other reasons, our pipeline program and everything, and I work with our program directors closely with some of that. None of that stuff really adds any value to you. So it's better to get one project done and get a publication or a presentation out of it than have your hands in three different things and you don't have anything to show for it at the end of it. Because you have a very short interval to get things done before it's time to apply, whether that be medical school or you're a general surgery resident. It's not like you have forever, and the time goes fast, and you don't exactly have that much time. So if you're at an institution that already has a lot of things in place, latch on. If you're not, it becomes challenging. And therefore, you need to get involved with some national organization in some form, whether that's going to the meetings, whether that's the STS and being a Looking to the Future scholar or a You Belong scholar, or whether it's the Southern Thoracic or it's Women in Thoracic Surgery. These are pathways in which you can meet people to be able to get exposure, and then hopefully that can open doors for you to gain access to people. Now, there are other things that you can apply for as well, depending on where you're at in your training. Um, you know, there's different institutions that have T32 programs and grants that you can apply for. Not in general, those are very competitive and likely going to go to people that already have a proven track record in research. But the reality is that getting something done is better than nothing. And even if you demonstrate that you've done stuff in general surgery. So if you had to go to, let's just say hypothetically, you have to go to the general surgery route before you do fellowship, which I did. Right? But you're at a place that doesn't really have a robust cardiothoracic program. Well, I mean, getting stuff published and things done within your general surgery department at least shows that you have the aptitude and the ability and some of the skills necessary to do research, so that these other programs, when it's to look at you, will take that into consideration. If I'm answering that, but it is a bit more challenging for the students, and I know this because many people reach out to me that don't have a robust network there at their institution, don't have a training program at their institution. It does make it more complicated, and quite frankly, you're somewhat at a disadvantage. So it goes back to my original statement that you have to be a little bit methodical about what you're doing. If that's what you know you want to do, you need to start that really in your first and second years to try to get connected with some people and get onto some project.
Amazing. So we have one more question from our audience. I'm actually gonna have Foster go off mute and share her question.
Hi, Dr. Bowen. Thank you for hosting this and agreeing to provide us advice and all that kind of. So you mentioned neurosurgery, and that's actually predicting where I am right now. The primary reason why I decided to pursue medicine was my interest in neurosurgery and CT, and those have remained my drive through research. I have a background in engineering, and right now I'm a third year medical student. I'm trying to decide which path is the right for me, but I can't decide. Like I'm going to miss this. How did you go about and choosing CT over neurosurgery first?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was pretty easy for me because once we started to do neuroanatomy, it didn't excite me. I think realistically, you're going to have to make a decision, and you're going to have to probably make a decision pretty soon, because you're trying to pick between. And I don't say that to discourage you. I'm being honest with you. I think that's something you have to really think about. You're trying to pick between two highly competitive things. And what can hurt people, and I want you all to hear me with this. I'm seeing people that are more than qualified, that are really, really intelligent, smarter than me, have strong applications. But what hurts them is how they're applying and their approach to the application process and the match. And so, what I will say to you, a few things. is that if you apply CT surgery, but your application looks like you were all about neurosurgery, that might impact you a little bit. It might hurt you in some way. It doesn't mean you remove all your stuff that you did from neurosurgery, all your publications or presentations. No, I'm not saying that, but you have to be able to communicate that you have a real interest. Unfortunately, there are general surgery programs that are turned off by the idea that you want to do an I6 and you want to do cardiac surgery. This is somewhat more of a broad response to that. And so you have to demystify your application a little bit when you're applying to both, and you're probably going to have two different personal statements. That's not answering your particular question, but I want you to understand that you're going to have to eventually commit to one, and it's going to have to be pretty clear that that's what your commitment is based on your personal statement, how you interview, and do all those things. The other things that is hurting people when they're applying is that, and I know TT's probably heard some of this from me, you can't just, I don't care what people tell you, right? I know you guys are amazing. I'm sure you got great scores. You got all of that. Just do me a favor. Don't read your press clippings, right? You know what I mean by that? Like, everybody's telling you all these fancy things about yourself, and you get all hype about that, and then you say, I'm only going to apply to Hopkins, Stanford, and the Brigham. Please don't do that, right? Like, you laugh, Grant, but there's people doing this, and I'm telling you, they're not matching. And then they come back and they're like, hey, can you help me? And I'm like, not really, but because I really can't, right? Like, but I'm looking through that. I was like, send me all your stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, you're 10 times the candidate I was, right? Like, the difference between you and I, though, is I got way more common sense than you do, right? Like, and so I would have never done that, even if I had all your scores and all your publications, right? Like, and goes back to my, again, I don't want y'all to think that you got to be humble or that's the only way to be successful. I'm not saying that, but what did I tell you? My dad said it's better to humble yourself than have somebody else do it for you, right? Like, that's a humbling experience for somebody that's been told that they're a top-notch candidate and then they don't match. So what I'm asking you to do is you need to give yourself a backup plan and a backup plan to your backup plan, right? Like, you need to have apply to all the nice places you want to apply to, then apply to some lower tier programs, and then you need to apply to some places that you're like, man, there's no way I want to go there. I don't even think this is a good enough program for me. I don't care. Apply there because that may be where you end up. And the reality is that if you don't match, it's really hard to get into CT surgery after that fact. It's harder. It's just a fact. It's nothing to debate about it. And so, but if you go to program X that you think is not that good, but you know what? You're going to be a general surgeon graduating from program X, and you can apply now to a fellowship position. And then maybe you get to go to program A for your fellowship. You think that's happened to people? It's happened to plenty of people, right? And and maybe you get your top choice then. All that to say, and Foster, I really encourage you. I can't answer for you what's going to be the right thing for you, but what I can encourage you to do is that you got to really make some real decisions soon. And so you're going to have to figure out if you know that you want to be a surgeon, you're probably going to be professionally satisfied with both. This should not be a part of your answer. I mean, or your concern, but rest assured, if you're going to be a neurosurgeon or a cardiac surgeon, cardiothoracic surgeon, you've picked the two highest paid specialties. I mean, in medicine, right? So you're not going to be lacking for financial resources, right? So like, pick what you think if those are the two things pick what you think you're going to like the most, or whichever one you enjoy, and you just got to figure that out. But it's not going to be a bad decision from that standpoint. Both, I think the lifestyles for both have changed over time. Obviously, both have a bad reputation of being really challenging specialties and hard on the body and hard emotionally and a large time commitment. But I think there's a transition, and I think surgeons are being encouraged to exercise more work-life balance, and that's being championed even at the institutional level. And people are recognizing that burnout's a real thing. That's obviously a high thing in neurosurgery and cardiac surgery, cardiothoracic surgery. Sorry, so I think things are getting better in that regard for both specialties, and we're seeing more and more women in both specialties. So you should be encouraged by that.
All right, it looks like we're 3 minutes after the hour. With that, Dr. Bowen, I want to say thank you on behalf of everyone in the audience and for those who are going to watch the recording. Tonight's conversation reminded us that medicine is more than just mastery of knowledge or technical skill. It's about leadership and community, being able to thrive under pressure and also lifting others as you advance, and you embody humility and humanity in a way that other people I've never seen have done before. So we're thankful, so thankful for your time, for your words of wisdom, for your ability to be your true authentic self and giving advice and wisdom to the next generation. And we're so grateful to have you tonight. So thank you so much for all that you've shared, truly.
Yeah, thank you again. I hope you sincerely, I turn down I don't say a whole lot. I don't want you to think I'm that important, but TT will tell you, I don't do interviews for any, I mean, they've tried to get me to do the same surgeon, different light, but it would be hard for me to say no to you all because I once knew where you were, and I felt like I didn't have anybody helping me along, and I was just kind of stumbling along myself. And so it's important that I made myself available for you, and I hope the one thing you understand is that I hope you will pay that forward to other people that come behind you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, truly. I hope that everyone has a wonderful night and look forward to the next session.
Thank you.